Alright guys, welcome back. GM Light here. Today we're going to be talking about Evil Dead Rise. I've just got back from seeing it, so we can finally talk about it. So Evil Dead Rise is about a reunion between two estranged sisters getting cut short by the rise of flesh-possessing demons, thrusting them into a primal battle for survival as they face the most nightmarish version of family imaginable. So what's so fucking awesome about this movie is that it provides the Evil Dead experience that I was looking for in this movie. I remember saying when the teaser got released that what I wanted was to see these heart-wrenching, terrible situations that these characters would get put in where they have to make some tough choices with their loved ones being possessed by demons. And this movie is really fucking unrelenting with that. This is a spoiler-free review, by the way, so, don't worry about it. I'm not going to be spoiling anything, not going to be going into any plot details or anything that would impede on your enjoyment of this movie. Something I got to get off my chest, though. The well was tainted a bit. I had a pretty obnoxious audience that I was dealing with the entire time through the movie. Just everybody in front of me did not understand the concept of putting down your phone when you watch a movie. There was one guy in particular where if anything story-based was going on, if someone wasn't getting dismembered, this guy was off to the fucking races with his phone, just brightness all the way up. It was fucking ridiculous. This was the type of guy that would need to play Subway Surfers while he's watching Family Guy. That bad. So just to kind of get that out of the way, because this did affect my viewing of it. It was distracting in some of the slower scenes, but I'll get into that later. Back to the positives. Right from the get-go, this movie sets the tone with a huge level of nastiness and mean-spirited that I was hoping it would go for. Especially too, there was a little bit of CGI, but there is a lot of great practical gore and effects, a lot of very cringy scenes involving body horror, just every possible worst thing you can imagine, things with cheese graters and eyes and fingers and limbs and everything horrible that they could do, they went there. There was no holding back at all with this movie at all. But even on a character level, something that I really appreciated about it was I basically looked at the cast of characters and I thought I knew who was safe, who was not. But this movie pulls no punches. Nobody is safe, I can assure you, and the movie will make you actually fear for these characters. Generally, when I go in, I could kind of assess the situation and be like, oh, they wouldn't kill this character, there's no way. Not at all with this situation. This movie threw it in my face and told me, look, you don't know shit about what you're talking about, and I'm here for it. I'm glad that they were able to provide that for me. And because of that, when characters have to make tough decisions, when they're looking at their possessed family members and they have to decide whether they want to dismember them or try and figure something out, you honestly don't know. And it puts you in a terrible position in your mind where you're thinking, what would I do? The movie hits all the right emotions and emotional beats that I was hoping that it would. This was something that I stressed extremely whenever I've talked about this franchise. When I think it's at its best is the Deadites are taking over these people and using the bodies of people's loved ones to emotionally manipulate them, trick them, use them to get closer to them, because everything is just a game to these demons. Nothing is sacred, nothing is safe, and they honestly don't care. They just want to be as cruel as possible, and that's something that they really bring back in this movie. When it gets into the later movies, it gets a little bit comedic with the way that the demons talk, but in this one it felt shocking and disgusting, and it was just a testament to the cruelty of these demons. The setting also provides a pretty unique experience and look that differentiates it from the other movies. It also creates new obstacles to have to navigate for the characters trying to survive. It's not as simple as they're just in a cabin or they're in the woods or anything. It's a completely different situation, especially when you're trapped inside of a tall building. If you're confined into an apartment, it can create really unique obstacles. And that's something that they take full advantage of when they're exploring this and the survival of the characters. Not only that, but on top of that, I really like the main character played by Lily Sullivan named Beth. She's a really unique addition. I think that she harkens back to some of the better protagonists in this series and in horror in general. She's got a tough edge to her. And although she's got those vulnerabilities, she's not perfect. She still overcomes them. She makes the tough decisions when it's time, but you also extremely sympathize with her. They don't have any over-the-top flashbacks or anything for you to get to know her, because you honestly don't need it. You get everything you need to know in the setup of the movie, and that's honestly enough for her to have her set up. What's also a good thing is that it almost feels like in this age of the internet that directors and filmmakers are able to figure out what the fans really want from the next entry in a franchise, and they could hone in on it and kind of tailor the script to not just pander to fans, but avoid some mistakes that could be very damaging to the franchise, but also hone in on understanding what people love so much about the originals, so much about the previous movies, using that, locking in on it, and giving us the experience that we all wanted, because that's what this movie does. What I went in wanting, I got precisely. I got the nastiness, the goriness. I also got those situations with the Deadites and the characters. Everything about that stuff works. Every aspect of the Evil Dead franchise that I wanted to come in full throttle really did come through here. But the writer was also able to inject their own flavor to it, have this unique setting, and make these dynamics between these characters work in the first place so that you actually care about them when things start to go down. Kind of onto the negative side though, and this first part, I want to put it more in mixed because it's not necessarily the movie's fault. It's just the experience that I had watching it. Because this fucker in front of me was on his phone for the first half hour of the movie basically, I was incredibly distracted through all of the setup, and it got so bad to the point where I stopped even really focusing on the movie. It made it just difficult, and then it also made me like just frustrated and bored. But again, I think it'll result differently on a rewatch when I, get to watch this completely insulated from fucking idiots. But that's just something I had to put there because that is just how I feel. The setup, it just dragged for me. But part of that could have been also that I was distracted. I didn't have the optimal experience watching this. So you gotta take that with a grain of salt. As well as that, as much as I like the high-rise setting, I like the difference that it creates and the obstacles that come with it. There's not as much of a visual pop to it as the cabin, the lake, and everything. On a visual level, it doesn't look as neat, doesn't have as much of an identity, but also as a setting, it's just a lot less interesting because of that. It makes up for it by differentiating itself from the other movies, but it also just results in it looking a little bit more stony, sanitized, and less interesting looking. As well as that, there is a daughter character where this is a trope that I've been seeing in a lot of movies lately, and it's just something that kind of minorly bugs me. I feel like Hollywood lately has had a difficult time trying to write teenage girl characters that aren't activists. I don't really know how any other way to put it, but Dexter New Blood, Ant-Man 3, those are just two off the top of my head and I didn't even think about it. I'm just kind of tired of that trope, and it's something that they've been repeating and repeating and repeating, just doing it too much, and that's not an identity, that's not a character. I think it's a cheap way to work around giving them a personality. It's a lot less work if you just make them a caricature or a stereotype. I don't think that being a protester is enough to make a character interesting, and I don't really think the movie ever moves past that with her. She's one of the characters that I think gets shortchanged the most in terms of personality. So instead of creating a distinct identity, at the end of the movie I'm just left with, what do I know about her? She was an activist. Kind of going along with that, some of the characters, they aren't fully developed. You don't care as much about them when they start to drop. They spend a lot of time setting up this apartment building and all these characters. But to be honest, it felt like they put some unnecessary focus on certain things about them that don't ultimately pay off. So at the end of the day, I don't really care. Especially too, because some characters die extremely unceremoniously. I just don't think that it matters that we set up certain characteristics about them, and they're not even things that really make you care about them in the first place. So at the end of the day, it just feels like it wastes time and it doesn't matter. But overall, negativity aside, which I don't like being negative, but I just got to point out things that didn't work for me entirely. This was an extremely solid movie, a great return of the Evil Dead franchise. I'm really glad that this is the movie that they used to bring things back. Hopefully they make some more movies. Whether they follow whoever survives from this movie, I don't really know what's going to go on with that, but there's a lot of great concepts that you could use this book for, and the flesh-eating demons. There's always somewhere else you could go, something else you could try. And although everybody likes to credit Scream for being the most consistent horror franchise of all time, I would say that Evil Dead's even more consistent. With Scream, you could pretty much credit Scream 3 as the really only mid movie of that franchise. But I would say that no Evil Dead movie really is mid. They're all very solid in their own ways. They all work, and you have 5 very solid films. There's some inconsistency in tone, and maybe that's what contributes to it, or they're just not as popular in general, which that's also a possibility. But 5 extremely, incredibly solid movies and a TV show that people love. The franchise is golden. I think that we're going to get a resurgence with this franchise. Theater was pretty packed tonight. I could see this being a big success. I could see it making a lot of money, and I'm sure that it was made relatively decently on the cheap. So hopefully we're going to get more from this. Evil Dead Rise, let me know what you guys think in the comments section. Are you going to see it this weekend? Have you already seen it? If you have, let me know what you think. I'd love to hear. Until next time, I'm GM Light. Have a good one.